All right, everybody. Hello, 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 hello. So we are here with Nicholas Townsend Smith, published author. He's written a couple of great books we're going to talk about today. He's also got 4 kids, and he is a master in industrial organizational psychology, which I can't wait to talk about because that just sounds so freaking cool. So, ladies and gentlemen, Nicholas Townsend Smith. We're going to talk about the entrepreneur life. We're going to talk about what is this whole world about when because like for me, I grew up in a world where you're supposed to go work for somebody. And I basically was trying to do that. And when I found out it wasn't working for me, it was very traumatic and it was also ultimately was a big deal for me. But ever since I chose to become an entrepreneur, I've become very attracted to being around other people who think like that. And Nicholas Townsend Smith is a great example of somebody who I have a lot of respect for because he wrote a book that's already made an impact on my family. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but here he is. Nick, thanks so much for being here, brother. We're going to have some great conversation today.
I'm glad to be here. We are going to have fun.
Yeah.
We're going
to have some fun. Okay. So first off, what is industrial organizational psychology and how did you get into that? It sounds wild.
Yeah. So when I was choosing my degree, I decided to do it in organizational psychology because I love psychology, period. But more so in the context of organizations. So you still have the dynamics that you have as an individual, but they show up in organizations as well. So how do you get people to embrace change? Change is difficult for most organizations and individuals. Most people resist it even when it's good for them. And so organizational psychology is really diving into the psychology of an organization. And so we get to play with the minds of masses rather than individuals.
Okay, so that means that you had to have read the book From Good to Great. Have you read that book?
I don't remember it. I think I've read it, but yes. Yep.
So one of the things they talk about in that book is how they help in this case with that book, they talk about not just organizations, but like whole countries and societies.
Yeah.
And how they change one little thing, like one little habit or one little action that shifts the economy or it shifts the culture. I'm assuming that sounds exciting.
Yeah, it does. In fact, we could probably dive into that, right away. So,
well, let's talk about it. Where did I'm assuming that you went to what college did you go to? Just out of curiosity.
I did online, so I did Phoenix.
Okay, Phoenix online.
So, yep.
So during your online studies, was there a lot of practical studies as well?
There were practical studies. I mean, we dove into. I was reading about 80 books a year, listening to or well, I say listening to because of Audible now. But also with the coursework, they were having us dive into the psychology, going back through the histories, like Carl Jung, Carl Rogers, Sigmund Freud, all of the greats, and so practical information. Yeah, I think so. Just we definitely dove into the mindset that goes into being a leader and leadership, and I think that's where the book kind of stemmed from because I wrote the book before I went to school. And then the going to school kind of confirmed some of the theories that I had around it.
Yeah. Then, so for everyone watching, which book are you, because you've written a couple of books, which book are you specifically referring to?
So my first book was The Art of Accomplishment. That's a simple framework on reaching the goals that you have. But the book that we're primarily talking about is The Giants and the Smalls, The Adventure of Rimi and Ritt, which is a metaphor of our inner world and how each of us are born with greatness, but our viewpoints change how we grow into that.
Yeah.
So it's akin to being an acorn becoming an oak tree. It's already equipped with everything, but it takes the right environment for it to express that way.
So what you're talking about here is like how the unique individual grows, right? And then this conversation about organizational psychology, it almost feels like you want to be involved in the individual in the group,
I do,
as well as the group itself.
Well,
talk a little bit about that.
At a micro level, you are talking about individuals coming together. And so what happens at an individual level tends to happen at an organizational level. And so really diving into the mindset of the individual helps the organization with their leadership style. And so we've got a framework that we developed from this, the 12 Journeys framework, that really ties into that because we think, as you work with the individual, you start to see that bleed out into the organization. So what their non-conscious behaviors are, the awareness around those, the navigating emotions. These are things that you'll see in every organization. So whether it happens at an individual level or not, it's the same construct that goes through the company, right?
Yeah.
So we can go through that if you want, or we
Yeah,
can
let's go through
talk
that. Let's
about
go through that
it.
because I'm
Yep.
kind of curious how, because when you said what's happening to the organization is also happening to the individual, right?
Yeah, it's scale, right? So we think in terms of fractals, like Benoit Mandelbrot talks about fractals and how small equations repeated create the complexity of life. And so what you see at a small scale tends to happen at a grand scale. And so if we look at human development, it's all about who we think we are. So we go into that non-conscious, that first journey is the non-conscious journey, which is helping people to recognize that we all have history and value systems, proto-value systems that were either handed down to us or adopted by us, adapted to and adopted by us. And those frameworks lay the foundation for our character, our personalities, our attitudes, and then they bleed into everything that we touch. And so who you are on the inside touches everything you do on the outside.
Yeah.
And so what we tend to do with the giants and the smalls and the 12 journeys framework is really dive into that. Like, who do you think you are? That question alone could really trigger somebody. Like, who does the organization think they are? Do they even have a brand character or an organizational character that they're operating from? Is it the same across the board, or do we have all these different personalities coming together and trying to create something, but they don't know where they're going? So there's no common brand message, right?
Right.
So I think when you get down to the individual and you start to see who people are at the individual level, you can see how that feeds into the macro level, the bigger level.
How that feeds into like the company culture or the
Yeah,
organizational culture.
right.
So
And
yeah, okay.
and you think about an organization operates much like a human would. So the organization has history, it has proto-value systems, ethics, morals, attitudes, everything that's done at a corporate level. And at an individual level, that would be your upbringing, your family, your culture, society that you've adopted to make you who you think you are. And many of us go through our world acting like we are way less than what we're capable of. Like, we all have the same human body, we all have, or similar, right?
Mm.
Outside of major defects in that body, most of us operate at a high level, a higher level than we're performing at currently. And so when we can help people see that, navigate and elevate themselves, then we can start to grow in new ways. And so we think it's really important that you recognize who you think you are. And I say that very specifically, who you think you are, because it's all a thought, it's all made up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I get the feeling that you run into where it's very common. And this, I'm assuming this is one of the first steps, or is it the first steps?
The first step is that non-conscious, right? There are 6 root journeys that we talk about. The first 6 deal with the inner world. And then the next 5, the growth journeys, deal with the outer world and creating into the outer world. And so the first 6 journeys are non-consciousness, awareness, grief, acceptance, gratitude, and empowerment. And these are all meant to recognize where you're at and where you've been, and then elevate you up to a viewpoint where you can actually see more opportunity and hope in your future. And so those first 6 steps, people will go back to those. So if you grow to a certain level and you're going to stretch beyond that, it's going to spin you back into your journeys, your first 6 journeys. Because if you go to the edge of your capability and you get into that insecurity of what's next, it may throw you back into old patterns, and you've got to navigate and elevate yourself back up. And so we
Oh
teach
yeah,
people how to do that. Does that make sense?
yeah. It's reminding me of a training I took a while back with a guy named Garrett J. White, where he talked about what he referred to as the karmic loop.
Yeah.
The karmic loop is when I have not, let's say, faced some of these things that you're talking about, then I'm doomed to repeat the trigger or the patterns that follow those repetitive things. So like if
Yeah.
I don't address a certain issue with myself and I get faced with it again, I dip into this, we'll call it a loop, a pattern where I, I become the opposite of who I'm supposed to be and so on. And so then I'm like doomed to repeat it until I face it. And it sounds to me like what you're saying is we've got to begin with inside before we can really true to make the difference that we want to make on the outside, like with the organization and so on.
That's the only way, right? The organization is a reflection of what's happening at an internal level, right? and collectively. So you've got a collective of people that are reflecting their inner world to the outer world. And so we like to focus in on the individual and how powerful that individual is. And when we recognize their power and others have that same construct, then collectively they grow. Right. So we taught 300 teachers in Southern Utah. We sat with them under this framework, and they collectively learned this framework, even though they're all individuals. So together they have this common pathway that they can follow called the 12 journeys that allows them to do their own work individually, but also do that work within the organization, right? So that they're going in a common direction. So it's really like I think where we get lost is people get stuck in this, that, like you say, that karmic loop is where they discover their non-conscious ways of being. They wake up to it very judgmental or justifying of those ways of being, and then they feel the sensations and emotions that come from those thoughts and judgments, and those are very heavy, and so they resist it. So they don't want to accept that, and so they resist it, and they stay stuck in that cycle right there where they don't acknowledge their life, accept their life, and then start elevating into gratitude and other empowerment tools. And so we really want to help people move from that justification and judgment into a gentle awareness and a curiosity about where these things came from. Kind of like internal family systems work, where they sit with the parts and have conversation with the parts. It's a lot of healing work, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, curious what that brings up for you.
You know, it brings up a lot, and because I'm trying to think about why is that not a natural thing, right? Because what I'm trying to think, because it's making me think of my mother.
Okay.
It's making me think of my mother, because whenever something is not going right, my mother thinks of the internal last, or her internal, right? So she looks to fix the things around, right? It's like, oh, the things aren't working. Let me go fix the things, and it's almost like to sacrifice her first 6 journeys for the
Right,
other
right.
6, right? Is that something that you see often, that a lot of, like, this idea, this concept of focusing on you first so that then you can make an impact on the outside? Do you
Yeah,
see that a lot where people struggle with that?
they do struggle with that. We're taught to struggle with that. So that's a social construct, is don't be selfish, don't be self-centered, right? Don't think of yourself first. I love
Mm,
Richard Paul Evans. He helped with the creation of this book. And he has a concept called the 5 rings. And at the center of the 5 rings is you and God, or you and source, right? And whatever happens in that first center ring is between you and God. However
mm,
you look at that, your higher
yeah.
power, higher self. Second ring is your direct connections or relationships, like spouse, partner. And then third would be, family, associates, and so on. And then religion, and then the world would be the 5th ring. And what tends to happen is we allow the outer rings to come into that inner circle and tell us how to live our lives. So we're conditioned and trained to not look at ourselves first and do our work. We're taught to take care of everybody else first. And so we allow their outer rings to come into our inner world and tell us how to live our lives. And then we try and operate from that. We feel like messes. We feel like we're broken. We feel like we're wrong, or we feel guilty or ashamed for even thinking about doing our own work. And that's a conditioning thing. I think innately we know how to do this work, but we've been programmed out of it. Um,
Yeah. And I can tell you, my mom taught me that pretty well.
yeah, yeah, and mine too. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
of
go
the
ahead.
analogy. There's an analogy of the elephant that's tied to the chair by a thin rope, and the trainer asked the circus trainer, "How did you do that?" And they said, "We started with the chain on the wall, and then we moved it to a chair, and then we moved the chain to a rope, and that elephant won't move because of conditioning, right?" And that's most of us. We've been conditioned to play small.
So, I get the feeling, listening to you talk, that you've been studying this long before you went to college.
Yeah. The theories were there. Then I had to go to work to prove those theories, right?
Yeah. What does is it? Can you remember a time when you didn't care about these concepts? Maybe they didn't. Maybe you didn't know exactly what they meant. But can you remember a time before, and like earlier, maybe even, I don't know, where you didn't care? I'm going to assume you can't, but I'm curious if you can.
Um, no, I recognized there were points in my life I was just existing. I had no idea any of this existed. I was just living my life the way I was conditioned to live my life, going to work. I'm the character in my book. I'm the small. And so, he lived a small life, didn't know any different, didn't question anything, was living it, doing his career and everything just like every other small would, right? In a world full of potential. That was me. I had no idea that this even was a possibility for me. I think what shifted for me is I went through a training called Impact Trainings here locally. It's like Landmark Forum. And I went through that, and that woke me up like, holy crap, there's more. And I remember going to one of the graduations, and I said, these people are weird. I want that. Right. I'm like, I don't know what it is, but these people are just freaking weird, and I want that. And so I went through the training myself, and it just blew my mind open. And that's where I really started diving into this world of possibility.
How long ago was that?
That would have been about 2008,
Okay.
2009. So
All right.
not too long ago in the scheme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much can happen in a small amount of time.
Right.
What were some of the epiphanies that took place at that event that you still remember the moment that hit you?
My stories. I started recognizing the stories I was telling and where I was holding myself back. I went through 3 levels of their training and really started taking ownership. I think was the biggest thing. I started taking ownership of my life and how I was showing up and how that was affecting everything around me, including my relationships. Um, and it inspired me to want to do that as a living, as a career, and I had no idea how to do that. In 2009 I said, I want to become a speaker and a trainer, and I did my first training in 2009. I just made it up. I'm like, this is what I'm going to teach about. So I had these principles, and I started teaching it. Somebody saw it, and they said, you need to meet a gentleman named Steve Hardison. I said, okay. I don't know who he is, but okay.
Okay.
And he happens to call, and I was struggling financially. I was bankrupt. I was foreclosed on. My marriage was falling apart. I was getting food at a welfare center here in Salt Lake, and he called when I was in the parking lot of the welfare center, and metaphorically put me on his shoulders and stood up. Right, he showed me my potential, and he was the anchor point for my book, The Giants and the Smalls, as far as the main character goes.
The
Now, there were a
giant
lot
that
of
showed up.
coaches. Yeah, there were a lot of coaches like that became that metaphor for me. But he was the primary person that I held as an image of what the giant was and what it might be like to stand on his shoulder and be taught by him. And that's where the book incorporates teachings not just from him, but from other powerful coaches as
So
well.
the giant in your book represents the many mentors you were learning from during that time.
Yeah, and we're swimming in mentors, right?
Yes.
Swimming in them, and since then I've been able to interview with our podcast alone in the last 4 years over 250 powerful mentors, and that's helped to clarify the message even more. Um, but it's like all these people are ready to allow you to stand on their shoulders. And I think there's a quote that says that if I've seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants, right?
Yeah. And what's the name of the podcast so people
So
can go check it out?
yeah, Wake Up with Giants TV
Okay.
on YouTube. We're on YouTube, and we do it as kind of a talk show format, similar to this, but live engagement. It's really really fun, and
Okay.
had some incredible guests. We had Becky Robbins on there, Tony Robbins' first wife. She helped create his entire training program. James Malinchuk was on there, Ivan Meisner, Nick Nanton, just a really, really powerful guest. And
That's awesome. So we'll definitely send the link for people to check that out. I have a curiosity about something. Is that you were talking about how you were before, and I think you used the words woke up.
yeah,
How you were operating before, and then you have these epiphany moments. These people are weird. I want to be a part of them, and then that right mentor shows up. Somebody once said that when the student appears or the student shows up, the mentor appears or something like that. I can't remember. I'm probably
the
messing it up.
student's ready, right?
When the student's ready, that's it. The mentor
Yep.
appears. So if that is you, which it sounds like you can resonate with that, what would you say was your opinion during that time before all this happened of working with like some sort of a coach or a mentor? I
Like,
asked you this because I personally have an issue with that. Go ahead.
I didn't know that was even a thing.
Didn't, yeah. See, that's me too. I didn't either. I
Yeah.
didn't
I'm
at
like,
all.
that's weird, interesting. It's like having a therapist. It's not therapy, right? It's like, my first coach was Dina Layton. You know, she's the one that introduced me to the impact trainings.
Hmm.
And it blew my mind that there were people that got to do this for a living. I'm like, I want to do that. That's amazing. She can do this for a living. And so I thought that was really powerful, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's incredible. Like for me, the revelation that there are people that do this. There are people that
Yeah.
are specifically called to help people, we'll say, use the word kind of crossover or cross through this
Well,
threshold, right?
I like the analogy of walking across the bridge with them. They walk alongside the bridge, you know? They don't push you across or pull you across. They just walk with you as you do your work, you know?
Yes, as you do the work. So, um, going back to this concept of working on the inside before we can make an impact on the outside. Do you kind of feel like a lot of people, and maybe you've seen some examples of this, some of the reasons why their outside isn't, let's say, giving them what they really want is because of their complete disconnect from the inside?
Um, let me have you say that one more time. Repeat that for me
I
so I
guess
can
my
get.
I guess my question is, do you find a lot of times that the people that are come to you and say, hey, like for example, let's look at your situation, right? Bankruptcy
Yeah,
and all the divorces, all that stuff. These are external things, right?
yeah.
And have you noticed that people are struggling with those, maybe things like that, because of a complete disconnect from the inside, from who they are inside?
Absolutely. Like, yeah, they think things are happening to them. They are the victims of their world. I think Byron Katie said it really well. She said, as long as you think the problem is out there, as long as you think that they are the issue, there is no hope. You're forever the victim of your life. So you're suffering in paradise. The last sentence of that suffering in paradise indicates that we're always living in paradise. It's our view of it that shifts. And so when a person wakes up to the ownership of their life, that can be very not pleasant to realize that you created every facet of your life and it's an expression of you. Like that can really spiral people down if they're not prepared to navigate that. So, yes, I think every one of us creates our outer world. We're just not conscious of it. We're always creating, we're just not consciously creating it.
Um, I don't know if I'm assuming you're familiar with Matthew Perry, who just passed away pretty recently.
Yeah,
I started reading his book a while back before he passed away. So when this passed away thing happened, it wasn't a total shock to me. I know he'd been sick,
yeah,
but one of the things and moments he talked about was the breaking down and the crying and the coming to God and saying, "Help me."
yeah,
And the thing I'm hearing you talk about is someone making the decision that they are not necessarily the problem, but they are the place that where this work that needs to be done needs to take place.
yeah,
And it seems like we all at some point come to that revelation. Some of us a little sooner than others.
right.
Is that in order to make that, we'll say, organizational change, and we can call organization like everything, their family, their
Yeah,
business, their job, right?
it's anything we touch as humans, right?
Yeah. In order to make that impact,
Extensions.
we've got to begin here. So can you talk a little bit more about what these six, I forgot the words you used exactly,
The
the
journeys.
six journeys.
Yeah.
And I love the word journey because it's like I'm here and I've got to transform over here. And in that process, I got to go through some good and some
Well,
bad, right? And then come out.
yeah, I mean, the number 12, right, is a number of completion. And we're all familiar with 12 steps.
12
This
steps.
is the
Yeah.
12
Those guys know
steps.
what they're doing, man. There's a reason
They
why they
do,
use 12.
right? And
Yeah.
the journeys, the reason for that is that each of these journeys is a journey in and of itself. The journey of non-consciousness is really journeying into our inner world and recognizing that we have an unfathomable amount of space in our minds. Every one of us, even with half a brain, we would have 44 billion neurons, roughly 43 billion neurons, and an equal number of glial cells that can store, with the full capacity, 2.5 petabytes of information. We can literally store the entire internet in one human brain twice. And when we recognize the capacity of not just the human brain, but the body at 37 trillion cells and 7 octillion atoms, and like the wonder of this machine that we've been given, even with half a brain, it would operate at levels that are unimaginable. And so the capacity of the body that we've been given is unmatchable in nature. There's nothing like it. It's unmatchable in the universe as far as we know. And we go around saying, oh, I don't have the brain for that, right? Oh, I could never be that. And you walk around in a freaking Lamborghini, so to speak, and you're telling everybody, oh, I could never drive that fast. I could only go 1 mile per hour, right? And to recognize the power and potential that we already have equipped within us, that we get to come into a world that's also equally equipped. It's filled with every material resource and opportunity we could ever imagine already. And it's up to us to see that. So as soon as we can see it, that takes us into the second journey, which is awareness, which is waking up to all of this, waking up to who we've been, waking up to owning it, waking up to dialoguing with these parts of ourselves, getting rid of shame, judgment, justification. And then you move through the journey of grief. And the reason we chose that word is because grief means weightiness or heaviness. So it's moving through the heavier emotions and fully feeling them. Edith Eger says, when you can express your emotions, you can heal them. She says expression is the opposite of depression. And so she was a concentration camp survivor, similar to Viktor Frankl. But it's about recognizing that our sensations, our emotions are there to serve us. And when we can really face them, then we can start to heal them. And then you move to the journey of acceptance, which is acknowledging your life exactly as it is. Like, you are where you are who you are whatever you've been. And it's not a statement of resignation. It just simply is, this is where I am on the map right now. And so when you can get into acceptance, Carl Rogers says that as you can accept your life just as it is, then you can change it. And I think this is where organizations struggle, is most people are resistant to change. And it's because they're resistant, period.
They're resistant to the acceptance of where they are.
Yeah. They
Do you
just
kind of
don't
feel
want to
like
accept
that? That's it? Like that's
Yeah,
the trick?
I do. I think it could be as simple as, this is where we are on the map. That's it. I use the analogy of the bear in the field. You're driving down the road and you see a bear in the field and you think, there's a bear in the field. I don't want that bear in the field. So you get out of your car and you jump the fence and you go out and you fight the bear to get it out of the field. Well, we know who's going to win, right? The bear is going to win, and you're going to waste a lot of time fighting the bear in the field, when you could have just allowed the bear to be in the field and you to be in your car and acknowledged it and allowed it to be there and accommodated if necessary, moved if necessary. But just acknowledge that it's there. There's a bear in the field. This is what's happening in our company. This is what's happening in me. It's so powerful because it gives you room for whatever's going on without judgment or shame, right? The first
Yeah.
step in transformation is awareness. The second is acceptance. Yet most of us don't want to accept our lives as they are. We want to get rid of it. We're fighting that bear.
It definitely, I think that resonates with all human beings, whether they are unhappy with how things are or whether they're happy. It's always like, well, if I got what I want, then what's the rest of my life for? So they just kind of go, well, there's got to be some sort of a progression. And in order to do that, then I've got to let go of my acceptance of where I am and start accepting that I should be somewhere else.
Right.
And what I'm hearing you say is that that keeps us from actually, we'll say, growing, right? Using that.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to hear a little bit more about grief on this, because it's interesting that grief comes right before acceptance.
Yeah.
But when you said grief, I immediately went through some sort of a thought of that you meant like grieving to me is like is some sort of a sadness because of an ending of something. And in this case, what you're saying is maybe it's like I guess what I'm interpreting is maybe it's an ending of I don't know exactly. Maybe you can help me with this. Why do you call it grief? Why do you call that stage grief? And then And you said the difference between, well, expression and depression, which is so cool. You can
Yep.
kind of get in a little bit more in depth on why grief, where does expression
Yep.
versus depression come in? And then how does that dovetail into acceptance?
So for the purposes in the context of the giants, the 12 journeys, we use
Mhm.
grief because it comes from the Latin gravare, which means weightiness or heaviness,
Yeah.
right? So to be heavy. And you think of emotions like grief is heavy, sadness, depression, anxiety. These are all really heavy, lower level emotions, right? But very healing emotions if you'll allow them to do their work. Most of us numb out to these feelings. We don't want to feel them. Like Glennon Doyle said in her book, when she came out, she said that everybody taught her that happiness was for feeling and everything else was for stuffing. So the more she would stuff her emotions, the more booze and food she'd have to stuff down just to feel alive. And so she has written on her mirror, feel it all. And so feelings are for feeling.
Feel it all.
The full range of emotions are for feelings. So the journey of grief is about fully feeling all of your sensations. If you look at accelerated resolution therapy, we had a great guest on our show, and she says that when combined with the EMDR, right, the bilateral movement, when you focus in on the sensations, not the emotions, because we don't even know what we're feeling. We try and label it, and it's like you might be wrong in what you're labeling it as. It might be anxiety, and you're labeling it as depression. But when you focus on the sensations, we're pretty accurate in knowing I got pain in my chest. I've got lower pressure down in my kidneys. I've got pressure down in my lower back. I've got a loss of energy. Those are sensations. And then you elevate your view. They're healing people as quick as 1 to 5 sessions with ART therapy because they're able to really focus in and express the emotions. And then if we step back a little further to the awareness side, you look at the book by Douglas Knoll on de-escalate, and he talks about validating people's thoughts, right? So when you validate somebody's thoughts and then you help them to feel their feelings, they start to heal and they start to accept their life exactly as it is. So the journey of grief is really about navigating the heavy emotions that many of us avoid with alcohol, drugs, sex, food, right? Distractions like TV or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about fully getting into them so that you can start to heal them. If you're on the entrepreneurial journey, I can promise you every emotion you can imagine is going to come up in this journey. Every insecurity is going to come up. Every
Yeah. I'm
thought that you
resonating
can
with everything
imagine.
you're saying.
Yeah, they're all there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So why is expression the solution to depression?
Because if you look at trauma, trauma is stored throughout the body. So Peter
Right.
Levine's books, Bessel van der Kolk, they talk about the research behind it. It's stored everywhere. And so it gets stuck in there. People go and get massages and somebody hits a certain point on their body, they just break down crying, right?
Mhm.
So it gets expressed and they don't have language for it. They don't know where it came from. They can't even tie it to a thought. It's just stored in the body. And so when it gets expressed, it's like a splinter. I had a splinter in my finger forever and it's just painful. And the splinter wasn't coming out. It was so deep in there, I couldn't get it to come out. So my constant thought is on this tender spot, right? As soon as I could get the piece of wood out of there, the splinter out, it got expressed. There was relief, almost immediate relief, right?
Yeah, I see. I get it. So depression is because of a lack of expression. And what I'm
Yeah.
hearing you say is that like we will continue to be depressed if we don't express, but one of the things that keeps us from expressing is even knowing what needs to be expressed or how to articulately express it. Am I
And
am I
that's
getting it
where,
right?
yeah, help is good for that. Laurel Erica, she was on our show. She's a wordsmith, and she says, the word depressed really essentially ties into deep rest. And when we give ourselves that deep rest, we tend to heal. And we have a view of depression where depression has you pull back your energy from what you're working on because you're finding it's not working. And so you're able to see reality exactly as it is. So you step out of your delusion because we're more happy when we're delusional and we step into reality and we see it as we are, right? And then we can reflect on that reality. It's true though, right? Because
Yeah,
we're
that's why
you
I
think
laughed.
some of the greatest comedians are so depressed because they see reality and they speak reality as it is, and you're like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, that's funny.
yeah.
Um, But when you can step back and look at reality as it is, then you can have a reverence and a respect for that reality, and then you can re-engage with a new way. And so depression is really meant to help you pull back energy from things that are no longer working in your life and really look at them and reflect on them and re-engage in a new way. Like anxiety has you reflect that into the future. I think it was Lisa Feldman Barrett who said that people feel depressed when they're not living up to their own ideals, and they feel anxious when they're not living up to the ideals they think others have for them, right?
Oh, yes, yes, because and the solution is what, Nick? Let's go get some drugs, man. And I
Yeah,
don't mean like I'm not talking about the illegal drugs. I'm talking about the legally prescribed drugs
right.
by our very well-respected clinical authorities. And that's the opposite. But that's the opposite of what we're trying to do. That's actually going to work.
Her work on emotions is game changing because it really has us look at what's going on. We all have ideals and dreams and visions.
Yeah,
And then when we don't measure up to those, we call ourselves losers. We call ourselves failures. Even the word failure is a negative yield from our efforts. And so that's all it is. But who determines what the negative yield is? Right? We do. We,
yeah,
we
we do.
subjectively determine what it means. And so we have our ideal, we call it a failure because we didn't measure up to the ideal we had. And so then we get depressed because we're not measuring up to our ideals. And then we think about what we think others are thinking, and then we judge ourselves against that. And the paradox here is that the thoughts that we think they're having are the thoughts we're generating and projecting on them, and the judging ourselves against those thoughts, right? It's craziness.
Yeah,
So to really recognize what's going on here is that most of our anxiety is around other people. And when we can really face our anxiety or our depression or these heavier emotions and really look at them and get curious about them and express them, the more they heal and we're able to move forward. The more we can acknowledge our life. We're swimming in paradise here. Like paradise hasn't changed, but our view of it has. And so it's up to us to shift that. I do my work every morning because I wake up some mornings in anxiety. Here I am in paradise, suffering in paradise because of some perception I had while I was dreaming. So I got to wake up and then put myself back together to step out into paradise, right? So I do my work in the mornings.
Okay. Um, talk about why mornings versus evenings. Just out of just this is just this is going to sound like a dumb question, but I'm actually curious what your words are on this.
Both. I just wrote an article on my social media post about this, and I love it because I see it with Neville Goddard. He talks about it. There's another book that I'm listening to on financial success. It's called Rich as F. I won't say the word here, but um, she talks about it too. And it just and the things that I'm hearing from experts is that there's a power hour. I think Garrett White talks about a power hour,
Mhm,
but it's a split up power hour. It's 30 minutes at night and 30 minutes in the morning. At
mhm.
night, you plant the seeds into the garden of your unconsciousness. So when you go to sleep, your body tries to figure out how to sort that out. For 8 hours or so, your brain is just actively healing the low level brain damage of the day. It's nurturing the dreams that you put into it at night. In the morning, when you wake up, it's like the sprouts have sprouted in your garden, and you step into that 30 minutes in the morning. So you want to do 30 minutes at night to plant the seeds and 30 minutes in the morning to recognize the sprouts and to start working toward those. Throughout the day, you nurture it like you would a garden. You work, you stress yourself out, you stretch, right?
Yeah,
And then at the evening, you give gratitude for the harvest of the day, and then you plant more seeds. So you go through the seasonality of the day of at night creating and planting the seeds of your visions, right? And in the morning, acting on the sprouts that have sprouted, taking care of those, nurturing them, right?
yeah.
So I think it's a blend of the two. I don't think it's one or the other. It's you plant the
Yeah,
seeds at night, you nurture during the day.
you're touching on a couple of books that I love that we're dropping so many books for people, man. Holy cow, these are good. The book I'm the two books I'm popping in my head and I want to validate or at least kind of add a little bit more to is the Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. He talked about in that book, the thought we go to bed with is the first thought we have when we wake up.
Yeah,
And so what you're talking about, let's plant that thought instead of letting the world plant it for us. That's what I'm getting.
yeah,
Um, and then the other book is called Think Smarter, written by a guy named Sean Livingston, where he talked about when you call it low level damage, people don't know understand this, is why sleep is so freaking important. And he talked about how throughout our day, every thought creates a toxic residue inside of our mind and our brain. And the more and more as we go through our day, all the things we do, it builds up this toxin. And he talks about how the glymphatic system in the brain is separate from the body. And what it does is it releases those toxins through sleep or meditation or both.
Uh,
And so what I'm hearing you say is that we take personal accountability for what it is we want to, how we want to feel, who we want to be the day after by doing some simple exercises, which I would love to hear you talk about if you got any, but some
yeah.
simple exercises to plant those seeds, go to bed with those seeds planted consciously, allow our brains to filter the things that are maybe not relevant, because we get a lot of crap throughout our day that really aren't relevant to what we want to do tomorrow. So
Yeah.
maybe this process kind of helps filter that out, and then we wake up with that. So if you could maybe
Yeah.
share one, two thoughts on like some practical things for the night and the day.
And in addition to, your brain can't have enzymes, otherwise it would consume itself. So it has what are called microglia that go in and clean up that low level brain damage. And as the cerebral spinal fluid flushes out, it gets rid of any debris. Different, and then it takes it down to the digestive system where it can be broken down by enzymes, but it has to flood out of here first. And so that low level brain damage is whatever work you're doing, the brain's going through and structuring and supporting and building up oligodendrocytes and astrocytes to make it fire more efficiently,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so if you look at routine, I have a declaration statement that I created of who I am. It's my I am statements. I recorded it to YouTube so that I could listen to it, and it's about 3 minutes, 4 minutes. It's pretty quick. But to sit in reflection of that, I do that at night and the morning. And then I also do what's called a 5,000 things journal. And it's a journal of 5,000 visions and dreams I want to create. And as quick as I'm creating these, they're getting fulfilled. It blows my mind because I'm writing them in the present moment. I'm writing them, they haven't happened yet. So they're memories of things yet to
Right.
be. And
Yeah.
we haven't even got into the growth journeys. I think we'll run out of time here. But but the idea is that I create my visions in the morning and I write them out. Like I'm sitting here, it's November 30th. I've got this much money in my accounts. I've done this, and this. I'm doing this. It's like I'm describing it to a friend. You and I are talking. I'm telling you about what's going on, but it
Yeah.
hasn't happened yet. Right.
Right.
And so my goal with 5,000 things is that's a lot of things. That's a bucket list that I don't know that I'll ever fill. I'm maybe at 150 so far, and they just keep getting fulfilled. I'm like, this is mind blowing, how this is
People,
happening.
yeah. Oh my gosh, you're coming back. We're going to talk more about this because this is something that people don't know that they have the power to do.
Yeah,
It's like the way we have it in our program. It's the future gratitude. It's the future journal. I'm
yeah,
writing this. I'm writing down what happened as if it happened right now, but like 6 months or a year from now. It's pretty cool.
yeah.
Okay, well then let's get into the journey on what happens. So the first six don't end with acceptance. Is acceptance
No,
the
so
last of the first six?
there are two more. So you have gratitude, which is
Yeah.
acknowledging the good that's already in your world or the positive. And then the journey of empowerment, which is finding tools, resources to help you elevate your body and your mind even more. So that could be people, grounding, oils, essential oils. Smell bypasses the thalamus, so it goes straight to the brain. It's the only sense that does that. And so music, dancing, baths, massages, walks, these are all things that heal. Therapy, having a therapist, even medications can be that for people because they help elevate your view of the world. Because before we go to the growth journeys, we want to make sure that we've taken that low level plane and escalated or elevated it up to where your viewpoint of a possibility is raised. So if I have you look at the next journey, which is in the growth journeys, number 7 is the journey of uncertainty. And if I ask people who loves uncertainty, 0 hands will go up. Unless you're Laura Lunt and you've been through our program, and her hand goes up every time. Like she
Yeah,
loves
she's great.
uncertainty. Right. But if you're disempowered and you look at uncertainty, you see fear and you see a repetition of what's always been. You see despair, you see a loss of hope. If you're empowered, you see pure possibility. Uh, And I'll run through these fairly
No, I
quickly
get
for
that.
efficiency.
I get
Yeah,
that part. The empowerment says I am equipped with what I need to go on
yeah,
this journey of uncertainty because
yeah.
it's uncertainty where I grow, where I impact the external, the organization, right?
Every great explorer creates themselves before stepping into the unknown. They know
Oh,
no matter what
yes.
happens, they can handle it because of who they are showing up in the unknown.
All
So
right.
it's vital that when somebody's feeling disempowered, that they don't step into vision and uncertainty, that they go back to the root journeys and re-empower themselves before doing that. Go do your work and then
Oh,
step
this is
back
awesome.
in.
This is already impacting me so much because I'm like, it's helping me understand more about what I do, but more like conscious, like, oh, okay, I got to really hit home. What I want to do is the seventh step is to go on the journey of uncertainty, but not until I've completed the first six, because it's those first six that are going to give me what I need on
They,
that
they
journey.
lay the foundation, right? They break
Yeah.
ground. If it were a seed germinates underground before it ever breaks ground. It establishes
Oh,
roots,
yes.
right?
So
That's why
cool.
they're called
Yes.
the root journeys. And so when you get to the
Awesome.
surface and you're ready to break through into the sky and you've got all these new elements out there, you've got to prepare the roots first. That's why we call them the root journeys, right? So
Yeah.
our symbol is a tree because it has the root, the shoot, and the fruit, right?
That's so cool.
And so the growth journeys are all the shoots. So uncertainty, abundance, vision, surrender, and nurture are all the growth journeys. And they're I'll breeze through these real quick just to give you the framework.
Yeah. This
Uncertainty,
is seven. You're going seven through 12, right?
yep, 7 through 11.
7 through 11. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. So 7 is uncertainty, that when nothing is sure, everything is possible. It's Nassim Nicholas Taleb saying that as empirical decision makers, that we should hold as our discipline uncertainty.
Yeah.
That we need to be our highest and most urgent pursuit is to move forward with incomplete information, which we're doing anyway. We're just pretending like we have certainty. We bring our past forward and we think this is what's going to happen,
So true.
right?
Yeah.
And then abundance, the journey of abundance, number 8 here, and I love
Okay.
that number 8 is the number for it, is this infinite. We are swimming in
Oh,
abundance.
that's perfect.
We're surrounded by everything we need. Wayne Dyer says you don't acquire abundance, you tune into it. Richard Paul Evans says that chaos is the mind of creation. And so abundance says that everything we need is already here. It's up to us to transform it. It's the first law of thermodynamics, that energy is not created or destroyed, it's only transformed.
Transformed. Yeah.
So everything we need is already around us. It's up to us to imagine with it and transform it from what it is into what we have in mind. We're surrounded by people, opportunities, materials, and resources already. We're swimming in
Yeah.
abundance. It's not something you get worthy of. It's already here. We're already in it, just like our bodies, right?
Okay. So
Number
abundant. Just to make sure I got this right. So in order to be able to tap into abundance, not acquire abundance, is we've got to travel through uncertainty. Got it.
Well, it's not that you have to go in a linear fashion here. Humans have this tendency to go linearly.
Okay, that's
It's
what I'm totally
relative,
doing right
right?
now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And as a framework, yes, but as a practice, no. You might be in abundance one day and gratitude in another day, and you'll bounce around. But
Okay.
and gratitude is the foundation of abundance, because when you recognize what's there and what's enough, you start to also see everything that surrounds you. So now you go into the journey of vision, which Einstein says imagination is more important than knowledge. So when you imagine beyond what
Okay.
is, then you create what could be. We bring the ethereal to the material by our imagination. It's the most powerful word in the English language is imagine, right? And so it's our ability to vision beyond what is into the what could be, and then to take the resources that surround us and create with it. Now, not once have I mentioned how you're going to do this, because people get so hung up on the how that they want to imagine from the how. So the next vision or next journey is surrender, which is rendering over the how. It's Steve Jobs. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only do that looking backwards. So you have to trust the dots will connect. It's the surrender experiment. It's you don't know how. You are not responsible for the how. You're responsible for the vision and yourself within that. So the surrender is letting go. You don't know how. I don't know how. All I know is we're swimming in possibilities. Edison found 10,000 ways that didn't work, right?
This is um this is the first question. This right here, this 10th step or this 10 part is the first question out of everyone's mouth when they come to you for help is, how do I do it? And we've got other work to do before this.
Right.
Oh man, to tell someone to let go of needing to know how. That's a fun process. All right,
Don't let go of the vision, let go of the process. Okay.
all right, what's number 11, brother?
11 is nurture. It's taking care of yourself.
My
It's
gosh.
letting go. It's self-care. It's nurture. It's growth. It's pruning when you need to prune. It's all the inner work and the outer work. It's giving your creation what it needs, and it's taking care of yourself while you do that. So 11 is all about nurture and growth.
So this program is called, what is the whole program called? Again, I want to make sure I get it right.
Sum Gigante, the 12 journeys. It's I Am Giant in Latin, SG program. And we're on our 12th cohort right now. And we run these about 8 weeks. And it gives you a framework that you'll use again and again. And that 12th journey is so vital, the fruit. The 12th journey is the fruit.
Man.
We'll just hit on that. And it's legacy.
And it's juicy.
Your why.
So juicy.
The 12th journey is your why, your purpose, your legacy. The word purpose comes from propose, which is to pause. It's to move forward to a place of rest. Purpose is a rest stop. So meaning of life from Viktor Frankl is to give meaning to life. So the legacy journey is about the fruit, the gift you want to leave with the world when you're here and when you're gone. And it's the fruit, and it threads through every other journey. And so when you discover your why, it helps you get up in the morning, helps you keep going, it helps you create vision and imagination. And each of us has a unique gift. Like Pablo Picasso says, the purpose of life is to, or the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose is to give it away. Right.
Oh my gosh, yes. So so there's a quiz that people can go to right now. Where do they get to that quiz?
So giantsandsmalls.com. It'll pop up right on the screen.
Giantsandsmalls.com.
Yeah, giantsandsmalls.com. And it's a questionnaire that'll tell you where you are in your current journey. It doesn't mean it's permanent. It's just where you are right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where can they get the book, The Giants and the Smalls?
Same place, giantsandsmalls.com.
Giantsandsmalls.com. Everybody go there now. Oh my gosh, this has been awesome. We're like, and I should have known an hour wasn't going to be enough, man. I should have known. So can you come back and we can talk more about this stuff? Is that something you'd be willing?
I'd love to give examples of it. Absolutely. Like really run through it, you know.
Let's do it. Let's as soon as we're done here, I'm just gonna let's just schedule it. We'll talk more. I would love for people to get, but for now, everybody, I hope this is whet your appetite. Go to giantsandsmalls.com. Go take this survey. I'm assuming it's free.
Yep.
Let's find you. I love when you said find where you're at. I think a lot of us are so I forget who it is that called it wandering generalities. You probably know who I'm talking about. I can't remember who was it called us that, but a lot of people, he said that a lot of people are just kind of wandering generalities with no focus and no pinpointing location. And when you say go there, find out where you're at right now, it's like GPS, locate you. And since we talked about this, the purpose of this is to start with you so that the external starts to change. Go ahead. Sorry.
That quiz is the awakening moment. Tells you where you're at, right?
So good. Wake up. All right. The awakening moment. That's so good. All right. Wake up, Giants. Oh my gosh. This has been awesome. And then of course it's not enough. We're going to talk some more. So ladies and gentlemen, Nicholas Townsend Smith, go to giantsandsmalls.com, take the quiz, get the Giants and the Smalls book, get several copies and start distributing. And this is what I did. I got a lot of them. And for me, this concept and the purpose of these interviews is to just kind of like help people get more exposed to knowledge that they just don't even know. Like you didn't know. I didn't know these things. I didn't know how much control I actually had over what it is I want in my life. And I'm grateful for you and doing the work that you're doing, brother. Really awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to have you back soon. And for everybody else, thank you all for listening.